Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway. I'm glad you joined me for this first Sunday of Advent. Advent is a very old Christian tradition. It goes back into the very early centuries of the Christian faith. It is celebrated the first 4 Sundays before Christmas, and it means coming. It's a Latin word which reminds us of the coming of Jesus Christ, and originally it focused a lot on the second coming of Jesus Christ. But as the years and eons have passed, it has become more a reflection on the Christmas season and the birth of Christ. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the value and the meaning of Advent. This year, my Advent series is going to be taken from John chapter 1. And I want to talk to you about Jesus, the light of the world. One of the most interesting people in the New Testament is John the Baptist. He is interesting for a number of different reasons. Clearly, the New Testament writers believed he was extremely important to the story of the Incarnation. The Incarnation is the central part of the Advent celebration. It is the understanding that God became flesh and dwelt among us. The original celebration during this time of year that was Christian was the Epiphany. Most Christians did not really celebrate Christmas as we know it until much later in the Christian tradition. But Epiphany was one of the earliest celebrations in the Christian communities. In fact, it goes back at least to the 2nd century and possibly even earlier in the Christian tradition. The other celebration that goes back very early into the Christian tradition is the Annunciation to Mary, the promise of Jesus's coming. Christians did not really celebrate birthdays in the early parts of the Christian faith. The reason is because birthdays were seen as very much a part of the Roman culture, and particularly a negative part of the Roman culture. Birthdays were celebrating that moment when you were considered to be important in Roman culture. You were born, you were now a human. But for Christians, humanity began really with conception. And so the Annunciation to Mary of the birth of Christ is actually the time that most Christians first began celebrating the Incarnation. That Annunciation was celebrated in the spring of the year. The reason why we have Christmas when we do on the 25th is that literally they counted from the Annunciation, the date of the Annunciation, 9 months, and that's how we came up with December the 25th. It's not because we actually know the date of Jesus' birth, but it is actually based on the date of the Annunciation to Mary. So that kind of helps you understand a little bit about where our celebration of Christmas comes from. It's not pagan as most people suspect. Now, certainly some of the traditions of the Saturnalia have collected around Christmas because of their proximity during the year, but Christmas itself was actually calculated off of the Annunciation, and that's how it came into understanding in the Christian faith. The Christmas celebration as we know it now was not really celebrated until the 4th century, the 4th Christian century. Before that, however, the Epiphany and the Annunciation were celebrated. They were considered central to the Christian faith. The Epiphany originally was not about the visitation of the wise men, even though that was very early a part of Christian thinking and celebration. It's found actually in paintings on the catacomb walls. So that part of the story was very important, and that was connected with the revelation to the Gentiles. Those two intersected with one another because of two reasons. The word epiphany itself means revealing. It means to be upon the appearance of, is literally what the Greek means, but it means to give a revealing of. And the concept was that Jesus was revealed as the Son of God at his baptism. And so the Epiphany originally celebrated the baptism of Jesus Christ. John the Baptist was central to that message and to that story. And very often in the pictures of the wise men, you will see a prophet standing behind Mary as the wise men come to her, and he is pointing at a star. Most people assume that's the prophet the prophets from the Old Testament pointing to the star, but John the Baptist was seen as the culmination of the Old Testament prophets. He was seen as the one who was the final prophet, as it were, of the Old Testament era. And he was pointing the way to the dayspring, the new dawn of humanity, the new hope of humanity, and the incarnation of Jesus Christ. And so the Epiphany became connected with all those ideas, and with the proximity to Christmas later on, Epiphany, in at least the Western Christian tradition, came to reflect the coming of the wise men to visit the Christ child. And so that's kind of how all of that came about. Advent had been a part of the Epiphany celebration since very, very early in the Christian tradition. It is believed to have actually originally developed within the Coptic Christian tradition. But it was a time when people prepared themselves for baptism. Many, many Christians were baptized at Epiphany, and later, after it became associated with Christmas, many Christians were baptized at the Christmas season. The reason for that was that they felt like it was a time when Christ was revealed, when his coming was revealed to the world. And so they would celebrate their newfound faith by going through a 6-week course of training and understanding of their Christian faith before they were baptized. And that's how the Advent actually began. And it focused very much on the second coming of Jesus and the promise of his second coming. But as Christmas began to take over in particularly the Western Christian tradition, we began to celebrate also the birth of Jesus Christ. And I like that part of it. It's part of the joy and the excitement of this season of the year. We are celebrating Jesus coming into the world, the incarnation, the light of the world. John the Baptist and Jesus lived in a very dark world. They lived in a world where darkness seemed to be dominating him. Jesus was born, and John was born under the kingship of Herod, a tremendously wicked king, a man who had deep problems emotionally, spiritually, and morally. And you can read about his history. It's pretty disturbing for a man. But he brought to this nation of Judah a deep sense of despair and darkness. His connection with the Roman government also brought a lot of despair to the people that were living in Jewish lands. Part of what we need to understand is that in this darkness, God sent the light. A lot of people believe that John the Baptist was a light, and the Gospels tell us that, particularly John's Gospel. The first chapter of John's Gospel tells us that many people believed that John the Baptist was that light. And Jesus later in John's gospel would say to the Pharisees and to the people in general, you enjoyed the light for a short, brief time that you experienced from John the Baptist, but you are not willing to receive the light he spoke about. And that's a powerful truth for us. We live in darkness unless we are willing to receive the light of Christ, allowing him to shine upon us. The literal word for epiphany means to have the light shined upon something so that it becomes visible. Jesus would say that men, particularly in John chapter 3, that men love darkness rather than light because they did not want to come into the light because their deeds were evil. But those who wanted to come into the light came in and received the grace of God. There is a sense of light that comes from the gospel. It gives us hope, but it also requires us to face the darkness within ourselves and to be willing to allow the light to expose that darkness. John would say that Jesus was the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. Jesus would say of himself, I am the light of the world. I am the one who has come to bring revelation, to reveal who you are, to show you clearly in the light so that you can receive the grace and the mercy of God. Jesus came to reveal us, to show us, and to also make us children of the light. I hope that you will, on this first Sunday of Advent, remember that Jesus came into the world to bring you light. God bless you. You take care. We'll see you hopefully in church